This lesson, we're going to be focused on the document app, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. We're going to be creating a document using it, and then selecting an existing document, so the one that we created using the ID, selecting it, making some updates, selecting the body, adding in a paragraph, setting the paragraph to be a heading, applying some styling objects to the paragraph, creating a table, adding the table, setting attributes to the table, appending content to the table. So we're going to be appending a row and then the cells of data. Also bringing in an image, so adding in and appending an image to the document that we've selected, adding to the body, and then selecting that body element and appending more text to that body element using the horizontal rule, selecting list items and appending to the list items, adding to existing list items. So if we already have a list item, then inserting to it as we select the index of the element, and applying different properties and different methods that are available within the document app. So that's all coming up in this lesson. Go over to script.google.com/home/start, and from there, select within the menu, creating a new project. We're going to create a standalone script and interacting with the document service. Document service allows us to create, access, modify Google Doc files. So we'll give this one a name of document app, and that's going to be the service that we're going to be using and focusing on for this lesson. So in order to create a doc, give the function a name. We're going to call it make doc, and we're going to create the document object. So accessing the document app, and then from there, the method that we're going to use is create, and then it requires a string name. So this is going to be whatever the document name is that we want to use. I'm going to call it new doc, and we'll call it actually new doc 1. And then once we have the document object, we can get some details about the document, and that includes the URL of the document. As well, we can get the doc ID and some other useful information as we create the doc. So we're going to go ahead and run the function. This is going to require permissions, as it's a standalone app interacting with our document service. Go ahead and accept the permissions. The permissions that it's using is the see, edit, create, and delete all documents. Just allow that, and that will run the code creating the document at this location using this ID. When we open up the document, this is the brand new document that we've just created. Within the Google Drive, the document's going to be created on the root of the drive by default, and that's sitting right here. This is the new document that we just created, and this is the Google Apps script that we created. So both are going to be accessible from within the drive. Once we have the ID, you can copy the ID, create another function. I'm going to call it update doc. The first value there is going to be the document that we want to access and update. So this is going to be the brand new one that we've just created it. We want to get it back into the document object. So using the document app, and use the method open by ID, using the ID value in order to open the document. We'll use the log to log out the document that we just created. And we can get the URL of the document as well as the name of the document. So actually, let's output the name of the document to make sure that we did get the name proper and that we do have the right document. And this is going to be accessing the one that we just created. So select the update doc, run the function. We see the name of the document in the execution log. So that means that we now have access to the document. In order to write into the document, we want to access the body, and the body is where all of the elements of the page are contained, including list items, paragraphs, tables, table of contents, and etc. You can also add to the document. So once we've got the document object, we want to select the body so that we can write into the body. So that's selecting the document object and using the get body method, which allows us to select the body of the document. And once we have the body, then we can add to the body content. So for now, we'll take the body and using append, and this should actually be the body. So take the body, append. These are the different methods that you can use to append. So for now, we're going to append a horizontal rule to the body of the document. Let's run the function update doc. And we see now we've updated the doc, and this is the horizontal rule that we've added into the doc. We'll run it again, and we'll append a paragraph. The paragraph is going to require a parameter. That's going to be a string value. So we'll write out to that paragraph the value of hello world. There's also going to be a callback of an object, so we can log out what gets returned back when we're appending the body paragraph. So that returns back a paragraph object, and you can navigate through the various classes of the document app. So we're looking at the body class, which has all of these methods that are contained within the body class. If we're outputting the paragraph class, on the left-hand side of the menu, you can select paragraph, and this is going to be giving you a listing of all of the different methods available within the paragraph object. So within the paragraph itself, once we have some text, we can then append text into the paragraph object. You can also get the children, get the attributes of the paragraph, and just as you can get content, you can also set and update content. We have some content in there, including the new content that we've just added, and now we've got the paragraph object. So in order to select the paragraph, we can now append text to the paragraph, and let's add some new text. We also want to clear the document, as we've written quite a bit of content into the document. And going back into the guide, let's go back up to the body, and within the body, we've got an opportunity to clear the contents of an element. So let's try to clear once we've got the body selected, and we'll run the clear method within the body and run the update code. And so what happened is we cleared out the existing content from the document. We added the horizontal line, added the paragraph of hello world, and then once we had that paragraph selected, we updated and added some text to the paragraph. Going back into the code, let's write some more content into the body where we'll append a list. So once we clear it, first we'll create a list, and we need to create a brand new list item. So give the list item a name. I'll call it list 1. And then using the body, append a list item into the body, and then what we want to contain within the list, and we'll call it new item 1. We can log out into the log. Once we do create a list item, the lists will have properties as well. We can get the list ID and log that into the log. Going back into the document, there's our list item that we've created, and this is the ID of the list. If we want to add to that list, we can append text to the list, and that's actually going to add to this list item object. We run that. The list item will have more content added to it, but what we want to do is we want to actually select the list and update to the list itself. Create a quick for loop to add content into the list. So we'll add in 10 items into the list, and creating the list items, we use the body, append list item, and then the content that we want to append into the list. I use the backticks in order to create the template literals, and then I'll use the value of I as we add these list items. So what will happen when we run the code is we're going to create a bunch of list items that are appended to the main list, because they're automatically getting added next to the next list item. But if we were to take and add in a horizontal rule, run the code, now we're going to have a separated list. So if we want to add the items back into the original list, this is where we would set the list item and use the set list ID. Now in order to connect the list together to the first list, we just identify the list object, and this will automatically now add the list items as a continuation of the first list that we created, but there's going to be a horizontal rule between it. Let's run the update, go back to the document, and the result is that the list items are going to continue to increase but we're going to still have the horizontal rule at the point where we wrote it into the code. If we want to select the list and actually add to the existing list, so instead of having the items after the horizontal rule, we need to insert it into that object. So we need to select the list item and then select the parent of the list item in order to insert it. Let's do an insert of the list, and we can use the list object. So within the body, get the child index, and this is going to return back a numeric value of where this particular element is located on the page, because we want to select that element and insert right directly after the element. As we've already written additional content, we'll want to select up to that element in order to output that. So let's log that into the log, and we'll see what we get as a returned result. So that returns back a value of 1, and here is where we want to start writing content. That value will change if we, within the body, and we add more content into it. Within the body, we append a paragraph. Let's add in some text, and we'll update that afterwards. So now when we run it, that's no longer be 1, it's going to be 2. What the child index is doing is it's getting the value of the index value of the element in accordance to where it falls within the body. So within the body now, we've added in another element. So this is going to be 1, and that's why this one is going to be 2. So if we want to add in another value into that, we're going to have to add to that as the point where we're going to be inserting the content. Otherwise, it's going to be inserted before. So let's create our new list item that we want to insert into the body, and insert list item. We're inserting, but we have an opportunity to set the child index position that we want to insert the content into. So for the list item, we can use a value of 2, put an asterisk there. So we've got a numeric value of 2. Let's see what happens when we do the insert, where we get the new item is added, and notice that it's been added into the list items. It's inserted it just before the original list item that we had created. So to insert it afterwards, this value needs to be a value of 3, and we know that we want to get it dynamically. So with the my list, this returns back a numeric value of 2, and that's where we're going to add 1 to that. So now when we run the code, it will insert that new item after the original list item was set. And this is how we can update the existing content, by specifying the list item of where we want to add it. And also, if we want to do a loop, add a bunch of list items, we could start with a value of 5, do an append of the list items, and instead of the append, do an insert. And the insert is going to require the other parameter, and the parameter that it's going to require is going to be the index value from the body. So let's select that, and adding in the value of 2 plus the value of I. So see what result we now get when we run the code. And that's added in the values directly after the original list item was set. Let's go back into the code, and we'll add some more content into our document. So let's go ahead and we're going to append to the document. So we do have a heading. We've added in appending a paragraph. We can also append a table. So first, let's create the content that we want to set within the table. And the table contents are going to be contained within a nested array. So the array is going to be the table, and then each row of the table is going to be indicated by a separate array that's nested within the main array. And each column of data is going to have its own item within the nested array values. So if we want it to have multiple columns, and then the next row of content is structured the same way, where that's going to be another array, and we can add as many rows as we want into the structure. And once we've constructed the array, we can take the body and append the table, setting the content of the table from that array that we just constructed. So run the code and take a look at it, and this is going to be the table that we just inserted with the data from the columns, and then the rows of data that we've set up. Let's set this as an object, and within the logger, we'll output what we have for tab 1, running the code, and that's going to return it back as a table object. Once you have it as a table object, you can then append the rows as well into there. So table object, we've got an option to append a table row. And for these, we need to add in the cells independently. So if in the cell, we wanted to add in a value of 3, and we run the code, go back in, we've added in and appended to the existing table object another cell. If we want to add the full row of content, we can set up an array, and this is maybe an array of content that we want to add in. So it's got a value of 3, and it's got some string values. And since we're adding them as cells, we'll take the code that we just wrote, and for the array we can use a for each method, get the element, and then as we append to the row, we can add the content that's contained within the array. So running the code, this is going to add in another set of rows, but we want to keep it on the same row. So we don't want to add in a new row. So create the row as an object, and within the logger, we'll output the row object. And then within the row, we're going to just simply append the table cells. So now we've got a table row, and we've created a new row of data within the table row. So when you are updating existing content, the structure of the content is important, and the object that you're selecting, they have different properties and content that you can add in. Let's add to the body, and we can append horizontal rule. And within the body object, let's go ahead and we're going to append an image. And when we append an image, it appends a given inline image. So it's expecting an image value there. So let's create the image. I'm going to use an image that I have online. So this is at a web URL, just a logo that I use. So selecting that web URL, I'm going to pull the image in from the web URL and bring it into our document. So setting up the URL for the image and pulling the image in as data. So it's going to retrieve the image as an image object in a data format. So selecting the image and then selecting the URL. And then lastly, we need to append the image object into the body. So let's run the code. We're going to have to accept permissions, and it does need the fetch method there. We are going to have to accept permissions in order to run the code, as we're making a request out using the URL fetch method. So it's connecting to an external service. So that's the new permissions that we're setting on this object. So close that and go back into our doc, and there's our image that we've brought in to the project. So where we have the heading, we can set the heading object and turn it into a heading, setting the attribute value for it to be a heading. So under the paragraph, so right now, if we log out the heading, it's going to be returned back as a paragraph. So it's the paragraph there. And within the paragraph properties, we can set some different attributes to it. So selecting the heading as an object, we can set the value as a heading. So this is going to convert it as a heading. And then using the DocumentApp properties, where we're setting a paragraph heading, and then from the drop-down we can set what type of heading we want to set. So in this case, we're going to set it up as a heading 1. Save that, and we'll run the code. So this is still going to be a paragraph, but the heading has now been converted into a heading format. Can also set style attributes into the heading and to any of the elements on the page. So creating the style that we want to use. This can just be an object, and then within the object we can attach some style properties. We're going to use it within the bracket notation using the document app, and then setting the attribute property. And from there we've got all of the options that we would typically have within the apps document in order to select the different properties. Let's select a foreground color, and we'll assign a value, and this is expecting a hex value for the colors, and this should be a reddish color. Now in order to apply it to the elements, we select the heading and then set the attribute And then this is expecting the object of the different attributes that we're trying to set. And this also, you can set multiple attributes. So run the first one, and that actually should be style. So let's run the first one, and that converts all of the text to red. So once we set a attribute, then for the next element, then what we want to do is we want to set the attribute back to the original value, or whatever value we want to use. So this is going to be flipping it back to the style 1. We're going to take the style 1 object and set the text back to be black, and make sure that this is under the style 1. Setting it all back to be black. And now whenever I append the table for tab 1, set the attributes, and the attributes are going to be coming from the style 1 object. Run the code, and we're converting it back into black for the table values. Let's add some more style properties. So using the style, and under Document App, select different font families as well. So that can be done under Attribute, selecting the font family, and we need to assign a value to it. Let's use the Calibri font family. Run the code. So it's going to convert all of the text into that font. And the way that it works is when we set the style properties, the following elements are as well going to take those same properties. So one of the best ways to fix that, and right now when we're setting it to red, even though the table we're setting to black, the list items and the other appended paragraphs are still going to be coming in as red. So instead of setting the attributes at the top, you can set it at the bottom. And this way, before you close the updates to the page, or you're adding elements into the page, this will set the attributes to that, only to that selected element. So running the code again, now we see that all of the text is going to be black as default, and it's not taking the red background color text, as well it's not adding in the font style. So that's how you can customize how the font and the styling gets applied to the elements as you're creating the document. So go ahead and try it out for yourself. Select some of the properties that are available within the Documents app. Create some elements within the document. Select those elements, update the styling properties, and you'll be ready to move on to the next lesson.